Oh, hi. This week we have an extra special project that I have been putting off posting about for almost a year, actually. And the whole thing started probably a year before that. So it's time. Also, hi, if you're new here, I'm Jo. I like to make stuff and do things. I call this Sewing Nerd Studios because I sew nerdy things, and I also am a nerd about sewing. It works both ways. If you end up wanting to hang out after you watch this, feel free to just subscribe and join the Bog Troll community because everyone here is rad. All right, let's get into the project, which is, you remember when Rob Czar from Threadbanger died and then eventually came back to life? And now has a pacemaker. If you don't follow Threadbanger, don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know how you are here and don't know who they are, but I recommend you go check them out because they have a really fun channel and they are why I got into sewing in the first place when I was just barely out of high school back in 2007. Yikes. Anyway, I personally have been following their stuff for long enough that they have awareness of who I am, and Rob is actually a patron, which still breaks my brain. Hi Rob, if you are watching this, that is still buck wild. And I got an email coming up on 2 years ago asking if I sew stuff and would be willing to make some medical device friendly shirts. Then I went down a big old rabbit hole about shirts that are made for people with pacemakers, and they are some of the most unhinged looking things I've ever seen. Maybe certain formats of that work for certain people, but I can see why Rob wanted some custom stuff done. It's funny, he messaged me about that around the same time I was actually putting together some pick line friendly shirts that had like some snaps so you didn't have to put your arm through a sleeve and separating zippers. And that was because a few of you, but specifically Alyssa, had asked me to figure out how to put some of that stuff together. So I am glad to have helped at least a couple of people with that, and I hope this also helps a couple of people. Let your clothes have some of your personality come through with whatever design you want to put on there. Anyways, the gist of the project at hand was to come up with a design for a shirt that would have some padding on the backside to help protect against a pacemaker that was protruding out a little bit. Because I think some are like fully under the skin, but not all of them. And again, all stuff I've never had to experience firsthand. I didn't realize how uncomfortable that must be. It was helpful to kind of see what some people have to deal with in their day-to-day lives. And yeah, I was happy to take on this challenge. My brain first went to taking some t-shirt material and adding some quilting batting. And then I also had some scraps of this sewable foam that is a product I was not made aware of until I was working at a costume shop as an apprentice. But I'm so thankful to be aware of this material and know how to work with it because it is very helpful. My machine can't handle too many layers because I don't have an industrial yet, but for what it is, my Husqvarna Viking does a damn good job. So I did as much as I could with what I had available. After a number of like prototyping and messaging back and forth, finally settled on sandwiching 4 layers of quilting batting between 2 layers of knit. So the first designs I had come up with was just a basic star. I think I was entertaining the idea of doing some kind of skull pattern, but what we ended up deciding on is a like vaguely anatomically correct looking heart. You know, it still had to be fairly basic because I was going to end up stitching all of these lines onto the garment. Looking at this, you can tell what it is, right? I hope. So while I was refining the design, Rob sent me a box of clothes. I know I filmed the unboxing of it, but I cannot find that footage anywhere. But it was a box with some shirts and some sweaters in it. Also, my stinky bean boy, Bert, has presented himself and needs to go walk around outside. So we will return. Probably be a lot colder because we had our first snow last night, which normally I'd complain about, but it's mid-December, so there's like a bit of relief that it finally snowed. Okay, I'm back. I have eaten Doritos and had some coffee and water. Let's take a quick hydration break. But I'm also very warm now because I ended up shoveling a couple of spots outside. So, yes, once again, cannot make it through a video without talking about how sweaty I am. We're on course, everybody. So, thread colors. We did black on the red garments, and then there were 3 gray garments. And we did 2 of them with part of the heart in blue ink thread. In blue thread, I glitched for a second. The vein parts were in blue and the rest was in red. The picture will be here so you can see. I looked at it like 5 minutes before I started filming, so I should remember. Also, I spent a lot of time on these, so should also remember. Oh, and it was also thicker sewing thread. So I normally use like the Gooderman 100% polyester thread. I also really like the brand Metler. Those are my two favorite for like most standard garment sewing. But since the stitches were going to be the like decoration design, I wanted those to pop as much as possible, so I put the thickest thread my machine could handle. Anyway, the one I like the most was the suggestion that Rob had, which was to do like a 3D situation and have two hearts overlaying each other. So I chose pink and blue. I wish I had been able to find like a neon pink and a neon blue, because these aren't as like in your face as I was hoping, but I think the effect still comes across. I think it looks really cool. A problem I was having though, if you don't know me, I'm very good at making things harder for myself than they need to be. Like expert level shit. So I was hand tracing all of these hearts out, and of course you're never going to get it 100% exact when you do that, and especially when I was doing the 3D heart, you really can't have discrepancies or it's not going to look right. Like it needs to be the exact same image, just like shifted over a little bit. So then it finally occurred to me to scan it into the computer, just print out a bunch of copies, and that also let me put this drawing into, I think I did it in my Cricut program where I have the die cutting machine, and it does make it really easy to like duplicate an image and overlap it in certain ways. I'm sure there's other programs I could have used to do this, but I was getting frustrated with the white space inside and around the line work also overlapping the other image underneath, so it was like whiting out a lot of it, and I just was sick of not getting it to do what I wanted it to do. So went over to the Cricut program and did it that way, and that actually looks cool even on camera. Like when I look at it close up, it just looks a little more jumbly, but a little bit from a distance, like that looks neat. I don't give myself credit for fuck all, so I'm glad at least in retrospect I can look back and like, it's a cool design. Also, this is the design Rob and I came up with and like we finally decided on, so of course it's gonna look good. Okay, so once I had the corresponding thread set aside to the corresponding garment, like I made a list to make sure that I did not fuck anything up here. Oh, actually, I just found the sketch. Cool. Until I started talking about this, I completely forgot that I did it, but just to keep myself on track, this is the layout. Also, this is helpful that it does show what each garment was. So there were 2 t-shirts that were gray, 1 gray hoodie, 1 red sweatshirt, and then 1 red hoodie. It was fun to kind of pick and choose what garment got what design. And yeah, this was the final assortment we settled on. And oh yeah, I was calling them Robo Hearts because I thought it was a good pun. All right, we're getting back to a normal body temperature. Excellent. As for actually applying all of this together, what I did is I made that big batting sandwich with the 4 layers in the middle with black knit either side. And I made sure it was like a really soft fabric that was going to feel comfortable like rubbing against someone's chest. I just made sure everything was like nice and smoothed out. There weren't like folds on the knit anywhere, and everything was like as nice and flush and neatly put together as possible. And as you can see, I did like a big rectangle because I wanted to be able to pin stuff in place and not have to move those pins while I was doing the stitching. And if you give yourself that kind of wiggle room when you're doing kind of intricate stitching on a top layer or something, it just makes for way less of a headache. So if something shifts underneath or gets compressed in a weird way, you're not completely screwing yourself over by having that stuff already trimmed down. So if you feel like this is an excessive amount of stuff, it probably feels like it, but it made the whole process much easier and like led to more precision and a cleaner look at the end. So once I had my batting sandwich put together, I tucked it underneath the part of the shirt that I was going to be stitching everything onto. As you can see, Rob actually chalked out a circle around where the padding had to cover, which is why I don't personally have any of the final product shots, but Rob sent some to me afterwards once he washed them and has been wearing them. So I will have those at the end if you want to see like the fancy final result. Also, it's probably in the thumbnail, so like it's a moot point to make a spoiler alert at this stage of the game. Right, so then it was a matter of placing the stencil on top of the chalked out area and the batting, and also pinning that in place. So tried to keep some like extra paper along the edges to stick the pins in. Also, I did use the same needle for all of these and then changed it immediately after sewing all of these, because if you stitch through paper, it's gonna dull your needle pretty quickly, much like when you get really irritated with someone when they use your fabric shears to cut paper because it dulls the scissors. Same situation with your needle. So I just swapped it out. I'm not super diligent about switching my needle after like so many hours of sewing, like you're technically supposed to. I don't know, it's pretty easy to tell once it's dull because like things start to go real hinky and weird, and that's usually part of the problem, or it just needs to get rethreaded. But anyway, just a reminder that like, hey, you may need to change the needle on your sewing machine, and you may want to have like one reserved for doing paper stuff if this is something you end up doing as far as like appliques and such in the future. If you don't want to like throw that one out, you can have it just set aside. Maybe put a different color Sharpie mark on it so that you know that's your like paper needle until it is no longer useful, and then you can get rid of it. So I definitely set needles aside for specific things like that because I switch between ballpoints for really thin stretchy knits versus the like extra sharp universal needles that will go through most of the wovens and honestly most of the knits that I use. But once in a while there's a fabric that just really wants to make my life difficult, so then I have the ballpoint needles to switch that up. Also, while we're here, if you have not defluffed the inside of your machine, or you can't remember the last time you defluffed the inside of your machine, now may be a good time to just do that. And if it needs a little bit of oil, maybe give it a little drink. Okay, once all of that was pinned in place, I very slowly stitched across every line, switched the thread colors when necessary. I really was patient, which is not my forte, about this because I wanted it to just look as nice as possible. And if you're trying to stop your needle at like a very specific point, you can always like shorten the stitch length so that you get it to stop at a certain point. Certainly don't be afraid to like lift the presser foot and pivot stuff around. I had to do that a ton during all of this. It also took some elbow grease because I had as much batting as would fit in my machine. So like it wasn't super happy to be doing this. So even if I hadn't actively wanted to, I needed to go slow or else my machine would have been very angry with me. To be honest, this was a lot of fun to do, and I have done some similar like stitch drawing on things before. I made some patches for some of my Patreon pals sometime last year, I think, and it was fun. Very tedious to put together, especially when there's multiple colors. I think there were like 4 or 5 colors in those patches that I made, but I have some set aside. I would like to do another round of like some design. So it's just a way I've never seen a regular, so because like this isn't an embroidery machine. It's not what it's built for, and it's just never occurred to me to like draw on stuff this way. And yeah, so I'm so thankful to work through all of this. Like I racked my brain for literal months over how to go about this whole process, and I'm really proud of how it ended up coming out. Hopefully, even if you don't do things exactly as I am showing you I did them, like this helps your brain go down a path that may help you out with something similar. And if you do come up with a different solution, please share. I would love to know. I'm sure other people that may be looking for this kind of video would also find it helpful to have other information. We're here to learn stuff and not put other people down if they don't know things. Me included. Please be nice. I'm a sensitive little bean. I'm a sensitive little almost 6 foot tall bean. So once I was done stitching all of that together, I snipped the threads on the top and the bottom. I was very careful not to like pull hard on anything and undo any of the stitching. I did back tack at the start and end of any of the lines that I did just to make sure none of this was going to come apart, because my assumption is these were going to be worn fairly often because they're helping somebody not have their chest hurt when their cat jumps on them, which is the cutest explanation of a need that had to get met. Then, honestly, my favorite part of the whole process, though again, tedious because there were some really small sections that you had to use tweezers to get some of the paper out, but pulling the paper off of here, since it had been perforated by the stitching, just listen, it is the best noise. Wildly satisfying to see that. And also pulling it apart was like revealing the final design, which was also really cool. Ooh, I am weirdly shaky, so I'm gonna drink some more water. To be honest, it may be nerves because I have put off doing this video for such a long time, where I know most of y'all watching are my bog trolls, and I hope you think this project is as cool as I have thought it was, but in the off chance that there are some new eyes on here, like, I am not good at accepting attention for things, so pardon me. There's like a weird vibe going on. I'm trying my damnedest, but as I said, it's not for no reason I've put this off for a year. My therapist basically scolded me and told me that like I should do this because it's a cool project and it could help some folks. So we're here, and it's indeed a cool project, and I hope it helps some folks. Okay, now for the finishing touches. Before or after I did the bias binding, I think the very last step was the fray check, but since we're talking about cleaning up the thread at the moment, I tapped a little bit of fray check, which is just like a fabric glue at the end of each of those lines of stitching on the back side, just to super make sure that it wasn't going to come out in the wash. And again, this is stuff that's going to get worn a lot, and I wanted it to have as much like integrity as possible. So each little spot got some fray check. As for cleaning up the batting, this is the point where I trimmed around it. I left a little bit of a lip around the whole thing, because then I made a loop of bias tape. Go for the wider side if you have a lot of thick batting here. I think mine was an inch wide. There's enough variety with tackling bias tape that you'll find something that'll work. I, flipped that part of the shirt inside out and put the loop like over the foam part, and then started stitching from the side of the batting sandwich that was facing the inside of the shirt. So like the hardest surface to access out of anything going on here. Every step of this process is a little finicky, so like super take your time with it, but like so worth the payoff, because once I had that first row of stitching done, then I took the bias tape and like flipped it around the inside part of the batting sandwich, like the part that's facing the chest. I flipped it around, and then you can use pins here if you want, but just again, take your time stitching that down. And the end result here, it is so very satisfying to look at. Just something about the shape, something about it being black fabric on black fabric. It just looks so legit to me having this on here. Like, this looks like something somebody could have bought at a store. It looks like a professional sewist did this, which, okay, that is me. I fit that description. I do this for work. So I made the thing happen. And a thing I am practicing is really appreciating the work that I have done and how good it came out. So this is actually the point that I added the fray check and just like let the shirt sit out for 24 hours before I packed them up to send back to Rob. That is the final step. Here are the final beauty product shots that Rob sent. So yeah, that's the project that I've been putting off for a long time. I hope this does help somebody. For anybody that is a Threadbanger viewer, I hope this was like a cool kind of crossover project. I am just really appreciative that Rob reached out to me to do this kind of work for him in the first place, because I wouldn't have known how absolutely garbage the options were for this type of like medical clothing. I do have a friend that had a double mastectomy, and it sounds like the drain bag clothing that they make for that type of shit too also sucks. So that is stuff that I have definitely thought about, and I will put a card at the end to the pick line friendly shirt. It's also just a neat design, I think, but if that is something that like may help somebody in your life or yourself, like that's there if you want to check it out. We made cool stuff happen, and I'm genuinely thankful to be challenged this much. Like, I was certainly intimidated during points of this, and there were absolutely moments where I was like, I can't be the person to do this. Why would anybody think I could do this? But obviously Rob thought I could do this, and I feel like we came up with some really cool stuff together. So very cool opportunity. I'd be happy to do more stuff like this in the future and just work on things that nobody else seems to spend any time working on. Like, I didn't realize there was a void in the world of like cool designed medical tops, but here we are. What a surprise. People with any kind of disability not being prioritized in the world. Huh. Anyway, to end on a positive note, I've had a little bit of like a roller coaster with my confidence in myself for a very long time, but specifically in the past like month or two. And I do feel like I have my spark back. I did a couple of markets down in Lowell, Massachusetts at Mill number 5. And one of them, I was just feeling really disheartened and almost like embarrassed to have my stuff out and like people looking at it. Shocked when anybody wanted to spend money on my stuff, but I was there for a reason. Like, I got accepted. It's a curated market. I got accepted to sell my stuff there for a reason. And people were coming up to check it out and purchase things for a reason. And even for this project, like, I was specifically sought out for a reason. So I can't be total shit at everything that I attempt, right? I started to let myself believe that more in the past couple markets that I've done. One of which, like, I put together at the brewery that I work for part-time, Rockingham Brewing over in Derry, New Hampshire. It's one of my favorite places in the world. Yeah, we put a art market together, and I got to, yes, sell my stuff, and I actually got a custom order from there, which was also really neat because I'm getting more confident in my garment making for other people, where I know I have the skill set. It's just I've never had much belief in my own sense of style or design sense, you know? But I have been faced with too many genuinely positive responses to my stuff. Like I can't ignore the factual information anymore. But yeah, it was nice putting together an event that helps so many folks in the community. Like the brewery was absolutely slammed. Every artist that was in our little market area did awesome sales. And there was a food truck that came and they also did really well. And even the vineyard that came, it was selling wine at the brewery. Like it was nice to kind of help out a number of people and have that sense of community, which is also what I so appreciate about everybody that hangs out here. We're all crafty little bog trolls. Like I 1000% count myself amongst y'all, and it is this camaraderie that we have about just taking a road less traveled approach to a lot of things in life. Where you want to know how I can tell someone does not belong in part of this community? Like I am not gatekeepy about fuck all, but when someone is upset about the coarse language that I use, or if I am drinking in a video, which I don't do as much very often just because I haven't been feeling like it, but I don't think any of y'all have been like upset that I am completely sober while working on things. I stutter and slur enough in my like normal day to day. So it's not like I'm not gonna mess up my words and stumble over myself and just have many things go wrong. Because listen, things are not perfect here, and we take a very honest approach to making stuff and just existing in this world. Life is imperfect. Wow, we got oh so very deep in the cheese there. I really appreciate everybody here. And as always, few things make me more appreciative about my life than everyone over on Patreon, because y'all are literally why I get to do this in the capacity that I do, where it's not my full-time job in here, but it's most of my week is getting to work in here in this tiny but wicked rad studio that I have. And like, I can't believe I have this space and can dedicate the time that I do to making things that I want to make. Like I just get to do basically whatever comes to mind, and what a absolute privilege. And I can't thank y'all enough for gifting that to me, and also just getting to chat with y'all. One of you came to the market I did for the very first time. I was approached by somebody that I don't know outside of them watching my videos. So hi Sam, if you're seeing this. As I told you, it completely made my day. That's never happened before. As expected with everybody I talked to in the comments in the Discord, I definitely had that feeling like, oh, it'd be fun to hang out with that person, you know? It was really reassuring having that interaction happen. So thank you so much for coming to see me. As far as I know, I don't have any more in-person events for the rest of the year, but there are things in the works for another event at Rockingham Brewing in early February, like a countdown to Valentine's Market, but obviously that is a stretch of time away from here. And yeah, maybe we'll do some kind of like project wrap up for next week's video, or if there's a specific thing I really am champing at the bit to make, whatever the horses do when they're getting antsy, I may come up with something in the interim. But this was the thing I wanted to get done the most. It was on my list of things to put out before the end of the year. I still have a couple more things on that list that I have, you know, a couple more weeks to tackle. We'll see what happens. But I've gotten to do a lot this year, and that is all thanks to you guys. But yeah, I just appreciate y'all so much, and I will see you back here with another video next Friday. Thank you so much for hanging out. All right, if anybody else is still here, but specifically Rob, I have one more parting gift for you.